Welcome everyone. Sunday afternoon. It's a good time to get started. Continuing wrapping up version 1.2 of mlops.net. Hey Brett, glad you can join the stream. I'm sorry that United is losing. It's definitely not the Sunday I wanted. I'm a big United fan myself, and I was happy that they chose Solskjaer as the coach. But I wish they wouldn't struggle so much in the early season all the time and try to make it up for all the mistakes in the end, which is too late. So that is a real bummer, but we are here to do something more fun instead, which is good. So hopefully this will be more entertaining. Yeah, I don't think they got any new signings, right? Get some music here. I think they have quite a few good players, you just need to get that a bit better. But that's okay, we'll do this instead. Alright, so really fun stuff here. We are getting really close here to a 1.2 release of mlops.net, which honestly is probably the biggest milestone of this library after the 1.0 release when we went public, because this is going to support Kubernetes deployments, and wow, playing around with this is really cool, and I'm still astonished, honestly, like what it can do when we just unveil it. So what I want to do first here, I actually wrote a list, I'm a list person. I want to walk through what we've done so far, because we have something that actually works pretty okay. And then I want to show you the one issue that's remaining, which we should probably be able to wrap up today, honestly, and get that going as well. I found one bug when I was just testing this out before this one here, so I want to make sure we fix that bug, but otherwise we should be good here. So let's see, that was okay. Alright, so what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and run some tests here. So what you can see here, what we have done for this library here is we added a new method on the deployment catalog right here. And this method is called deploy model to Kubernetes async, and I tried to add some description of what it does here. But what it generally does is that it takes a type of model input and output. So that's, the input here is going to be what to train your model on, right? So if you're doing a product review classifier, this probably will contain a property for the actual review, and then a boolean of some sort if it's positive or negative. And the output here is going to be the predicted label and those things from the output of the model. So it takes those to have the schema of the Kubernetes service, and then it takes us the deployment targets, which we're going to deploy to, and this is very simple stuff, right? It doesn't hold much information, mostly just a name and when it was created and if it has any deployments. So this could be like, staging, test, production, what have you, just to have a name more or less for this. And then it takes the registered model here. This is the important stuff here. And a registered model, again, is just a wrapper around a run artifact, really. So if you have run multiple runs and you finally have a model that you think, hey, this is actually a pretty good one, you can then register it into our model repository, which will can I just make sure we have a description for it, and most importantly here we have a version. So we have version 1, version 2, version 3, so you can continuously improve upon your registered model here. But that's really the only thing we need to pass into this method here, and after that it's going to do all this cool stuff here. It's going to first of all go ahead and build and push an image to a container registry we have chosen. So in our case here, it's going to decompile the model input output here to C# classes, strings, and it's going to go ahead and build the Docker image, and it's going to push that image to a container registry of our choosing here, and it's going to download the image from our model repository and let's place that into the image as well. So we have this nice fuzzy image that we then push to a registry of our choosing, and we can use it either for something else or for deployment. But what the tool does then is it goes ahead and does one more thing here. It deploys it to a cluster, and it does that by creating a namespace in Kubernetes to deploy to, and then it's deploying that model to that namespace. And the deployment here, if you haven't worked too much with Kubernetes, it could seem like Greek. Definitely seemed like Greek to me a month ago. But what it's doing here is creating an image pool secret. And what that means is we are creating the credentials for Kubernetes to go back to the container registry and pull that image. Because remember, this is most likely going to be a private registry, and the private registry needs to have credentials so someone can read from it. What we then do is this here. And what that is doing is defining how we want to deploy this image to Kubernetes. So we are more or less saying here that create a deployment for this specific image, and please expose that to a load balancer to the world with an external IP address. So anyone can access it through an API method and call this with the model input and get a model output back. And the final thing we're doing here is we're actually going ahead and getting the external API to the cluster and generating this HTTP endpoint here, so that when anyone has deployed a model to a Kubernetes cluster, we can also expose it and use it. And one thing I wanted to do here, because I saw we had a little issue actually, is this external IP. I want to do this. We had some white spaces I saw in our IP address when I was testing this, so I'm going to do that. So this is a lot to take in, so what I want to do is show you an example here by running a test that we run. So we love tests, right? MLOps are that's testable. Everything is automated because I don't honestly want to do any manual testing, and I want to make sure we automate everything. And I've done that as well for this Kubernetes deployment here. So we have this new class called Kubernetes end-to-end test, and it only runs for SQLite. And what it does is going through a whole flow. It is training a simple Titanic predictor, and it's going to then register that model in our model repository here, creating a deployment target of test right here, and then it's going to deploy that to Kubernetes. And the way we have configured that is like this. So we see we have this MLOps builder, and we have this local file model repository, as we do usually. We're backing it up with a SQLite database. And then we have these two new methods here. Use container registry makes sure that you can actually submit your registry name, your username, and your password, so the tool can actually access this container registry. Because remember, that's important when you want to push something to the registry or access it. So for example here, I have my registries right here, and I have this container registry right here called mlops net. And in our case here, what I'm doing actually is applying those credentials here to this registry. So this tool here can actually push things and get things from it. And then finally, we need to be able to access Kubernetes as well. So Kubernetes we need to know where the cluster is and how we can access it. And the way this is done normally in like Kubernetes native is using something called a kube config. And a kube config, definitely kind of Google that, but that's like it's just a file. It contains the secrets and tokens and endpoints to your cluster. And you can generate that from Azure or AWS or wherever you have it. So if you're running a cluster in the cloud, you can actually export that file. And all you need to do here is just tell the tool where is the file. Or if you want to just supply the whole content, you can supply the whole content in here as well, which is useful, for example, in GitHub Actions, where you can maybe supply a secret and the content is the file itself. So anyway, this is the wiring up phase of this. So we're actually going against a real Azure instance here. So let's go ahead and run this test and see what happens here. So first of all, let's make sure we have a look here. This is the Kubernetes service that I want to deploy this to. And this music is too movie-like for me. Let me get something else. Up a beat. There we go. So we have a Kubernetes service here called mlopsnet, and currently, if you look at namespaces here, we have only the default ones here, so we have nothing special here. So we're going to use the tool now and deploy a service straight to this namespace all the way, and hoping for the best it's going to work. So if you right-click here and hit debug test, we'll put an endpoint just before we deploy it to make sure that we train the model and register everything first. And let's see what it's doing behind the scenes here. And I think I do have... Let me go into the folder as well when this is done, because I want to show you some cool stuff here. Alright, so now we have a deployment target here, and we have a register model here. So we're good to go, but I want to show you how this is going to look at what it's doing in the background here. So we have this integration tests here, bin folder, okay, good. So if I let this loose right now, let's let this loose here, F10 again, it's going to go start doing things here. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to install, it's going to go ahead and create a new solution right here. There we go. So it's installing a little new template here, and it's creating a new ASP.NET Core application. It's copying over the model file and the schema files here. So the schema files are already here, and those are the ones we passed in as input and output. And we should have a, there we go, model is here. So this is a model copied over from our model registry. So this is a version model, right? And then what it's doing is running the Docker build here for us, and it's going to create a new image, and it's going to push that to my registry. So we can see here that if I refresh this, we should have a new image anytime soon. And I've run a couple ones just before this. Here we go. That's the image. So we now have an image in a container registry in Azure for this specific one, version 3, which is the third version of this model that we're running. And now what it's doing is actually deploying it to Kubernetes. So if you look at namespaces here, we'll see we have a new namespace created 12 seconds ago here. And this namespace is going to hold our pods and our replicas and our service that we're exposing to the world here. And while we're waiting for this to be deployed, which is currently happening, and fetching the external API here, or external IP, sorry. Let's wait for that. So we should actually get to this method here, line 77 here, in just a bit. Let's see if it's loading. It's still running, which is a good thing. So what it's doing right now, by the way, is it's polling the Kubernetes cluster right now, and it's checking, have you given me an IP address or not? And here we go, it's done. So it returns a deployment to me, and if you look at the deployment object here, I now have a deployment URI. So you see here that this is an external API address that I can call myself to get a prediction. And I'm gonna let it, I will let the test do it for me, of course, because that's kind of what the test is doing here. Is actually calling that API with a payload here and making sure we get a successful message back, and then it cleans up the resources. But what I want to do here as well is I want to call this a postman, because I want to show you like this is actually happening. So if we get the IP address here, and you can honestly do it yourself if you wanted to. I pulled in postman here so you can see. I paste in the IP address here, so this is the external IP address. This is the endpoint that I'm hitting. And this is the data for the Titanic predictor. So I'm going to say the third passenger class, I'm a male, I'm 4 years old. And I'm going to send this, and it's a post method. I'm getting a response back. So I'm getting a probability that, hey, I will probably not survive, and this is my score and my probability of these things. So honestly, with a couple of minutes here, we have suddenly created an image, deployed the image to Kubernetes cluster, exposed external API. We have persisted that IP address into the database, so we can access that later. And if you run the test now, hopefully it's going to pass as well here. So if you run that, it's going to keep running, and it's going to get check the successful code, and it's going to clean up my resource here. And it's just doing that because I have limited number of nodes in my cluster, and if I run this all the time, it's going to just allocate too many and eventually run out of memory. So what I'm doing at the end here is I'm just cleaning out the namespace and removing all the services, because we don't really care about that for our use case. So if you look at this right now, it's active, but you'll see here it's gone now. So the test removed that, and it's done, and it's green. So yay, awesome, right? I think it's really cool, like one line of code here and you get all the deployment working for you. So that was the kind of the show of what we've done so far with this tool, and we have a couple of things left here because it's doing a lot of stuff here behind the scenes. So one thing that you will notice here is that we have to provide the schema, because the schema is going to be what we copy over, right? So if you look at the schema here that we copied over, open that with code, you will see this is the Titanic schema that we actually passed in here. So it's survived, passed into class, the gender and age. And if you look at the schema we passed in here, it's actually the same thing. Survived, passed into class, sex, age, right? So it's just kind of just decompiling that runtime instance and creating a C# class. And that's awesome. But let's think about this a bit. You will probably never want to deploy to test stage or production when you run your CI pipeline. Most likely because you want to do it through a UI that hopefully you're going to build, or just some other time. So you may not have the model input and the model output schemas available for you when you want to deploy it, but you may be able to get the deployment target and register the model, right? So we want to create a method here that is like this, where you don't have to supply the schema, and the schema is already done for you before. So what we've done to achieve that, the build things we've done before, is that we created on the lifecycle catalog here, we have created this method called register model schema. And this register model schema is a method you can call with the run ID and pass in the types here. And what it's going to do is going to call the schema generator, and it's going to generate this model schema, and it's going to associate that with a run. So you can imagine that you want to create a run, and during that run you want to register the model schemas, but then later you want to deploy it. Well, great, now you already have the schema registered and all good, so you can do that later. So what we want to do right now is that we want to have a way to have a new method overload that, instead of taking the inputs of the generic inputs, will actually fetch the model schema from the run and use that instead. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is this last issue here that we're going to do today. So we're going to add ability to deploy a model to Kubernetes cluster using the save schema from before. So that's just an same functionality we're already doing, but just going to pipe in a different use case here, and then we'll be done with 1.2, I think. Sounds good? Questions, concerns, thoughts? Hopefully it makes sense. It's definitely grown a lot, this library. Alright. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and just start by creating the method that we want to run here and understand how it's going to work. So in general, we want to have this deploy model to Kubernetes sync, but we don't want to do these inputs. So I'm going to be very selfish here. I'm just going to copy this model here, copy this method, and we're going to remove these inputs here, because that's what are going to be the method signature that we want to use here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and copy this definition here, and license uses the model schema previously registered in register model schema. Okay, I think that's fine. So you see now that we have a couple of build issues here that we have to figure out. So we have this build and push image to sync, and what it's doing is taking those types as well, and then based on that is going to create this input for us. So we need to figure out a better way of doing this, because get schema is a function here, and what I want to do is more functional programming here. So let's see, this is returning returning those, so that's good. So what we could do here is, instead of doing the build and push image to sync, we can actually pass this method up one layer here. So I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to go ahead and say whoever calls this method, which is going to be here, right? I will say you can get the schema through this method, right? And then I will take away these generics here, I will go ahead and copy this definition here of a func. So we are doing some more functional programming right here instead. So we're passing in a function that where the caller can actually get this information that it needs. And the reason why I do this is because it gets very reusable and very isolated here. So in our case here, what we can do is, instead of doing the build and push image like this, we can pass in a function to get model input and output. And we can remove this generics like this. And now you see this still compiles. Get schema. And let's see. Let's see what this build issue is. Okay, let's go ahead and add a node here. Okay, so the old method here still compiles. That's good. And now, we can see that we now can pass this in here, which is the old one, right? So get schema is still fine. So when it needs a schema, it's going to call this local function here and get it based on this. And we'll go ahead and just do one little improvement here. Because I actually have a constant file now for this. Model input, just so we don't have to have these kind of hard-coded strings here. Model output. Okay. Nice. So what about this new method, right? So now we have this new method. So we need to be able to pass in a function as well to do the same thing here. So what we're doing is we need a local function with the same definition here. But instead of getting it from a schema generator here, what we're going to do is be a little bit smart here. We are going to go ahead and say get a run, please. And I think I have a run repository here. No. This is deployment catalog. So what do we have available here for us? We got the experiment repository. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the run repository as well here. We need the run available for us. So I pass in the run repository. We're going to have a couple of compile issues here, but that'd be fine. So we pass that in. What we can then do is run repository, get run, and we can pass in the run ID here, which we're going to find on the registry model that we just had here. And the run here, the cool thing with the run here is that we're actually going to have the model input and output here. So we can say model input is going to be run schemas, model schemas first. And we'll do, I think, is name. It's going to be, sorry, name is going to be constant model input here. So we're actually saving these names, right? So we have a schema like this, and then the model output here is going to be the one with that. And this is going to be model output. And instead of passing these back here, we need to pass back the definition. So these are classes, right? So if you look at what this is, a model schema is just a class, and it has a name, which is going to be either model input or model output, and it's a definition, which is a C# class as a string. But we need to pass back the definition here instead. So we're going to do definition here, which is going to be definition, and then definition. And what we're passing back here is actually a name tuple, which is, I think, is a really nice concept. We can give it a name here directly, so it doesn't need to be a type itself. It's going to be this kind of generic thing here, which I find more and more useful, especially with functional programming schemas. Alright, there you go. So now it compiles. So the only thing I want to do here before we start fixing compilation issues here is that we need to make sure that the user knows that if you haven't registered the schema, you're in trouble. So we need to make sure that's something that's functional. And I think what we can do here is get schema. We have to add kind of a validation here. So what I'll do here is say run model schemas, And what we'll do here is say, well, I wonder if it's gonna be null by default. We'll do this instead. So if there's none here, I want to throw a new exception here. And what we'll do is we'll create a new custom exception, because I think in the UI part later we want to capture that. So we'll create a custom exception for this, and we can just kind of copy paste one we already have here, and we'll say this is going to be exception of type model schema not registered exception. Okay, right. Custom exception for lack of registered model schema. Okay. So we'll do the exception here, and we'll say model schema. The model schema needs to be registered before deploying please use. And what we'll do is little magic here. Name of lifecycle catalog. Okay, I think that works. Nope, it doesn't work. What is... okay, there we go. One more. Okay, so that will hopefully give the user some information here. So if we haven't actually registered any schemas and we still want to call this method, it's going to throw an exception here, and that's just telling the user that, hey, if you want to use this method, that's awesome, but you need to call this register model schema before we actually do this. So hopefully that makes sense, and then we'll get that from there. And the cool thing with this is that if we have this method now, everything else should work as expected here. So the build and push image of sync here is going to use this get schema method here to build an image. You'll see here that we pass that in all the way here, and it's used here in the copy schema method here. So when we need to copy the schema, it's just going to execute this method as a deferred method. It's going to get the model input and model output, and it's going to go ahead and kind of copy them over where they need to be here. So a very easy way of reusing this, which I really like here. And last thing here is that I want to go ahead and fix this up a bit. Vector path, why do I have... let's see, I want to do this here. Constant. Model input. I'm going to fix this just so we don't have to worry about the specific stuff here. Okay. So just in case we change these names, it's changed in one place. That's kind of what I'm trying to do right now. Okay. And we also know where it's used. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and build a solution, because I am pretty sure we're gonna have a lot of build errors right now, and then we're gonna add some tests here and see how this works. Hopefully this will work, and then we'll add some tests for the specific method as well. So it should be definitely more than one exception here, but you see now we need to run repository here, and we should have it available. Okay, let's build it again, because I think we have more issues. The weather is beautiful here, by the way, in DC right now. It's a crisp fall weather. It's like 20 degrees Celsius and just gorgeous outside. I had a run this morning and just enjoyed lunch on the porch. It's definitely one of those days where you can enjoy being outside. Okay, so let's go ahead and add run repository mock here. Hope everyone's weekend has been good so far. I'm starting a big kitchen renovation project tomorrow here. That's going to be really fun actually. We've been planning it for almost a year now. Obviously a lot more last few days here, but it'll be fun to get started and done. Here. Okay, so now we have an issue here with the test, because it's not going to take, it's going to take a schema instead here. So this is just testing, should not call create deployment sync. So we can just do this, string model input, string model output, get schema. This is the unit test, so what we can do is just do it very like easy here. We can do turn, actually not put them yet, input, output. There we go, and there we go. And see if all of these tests will pass later, but that's another issue. Okay, we got a couple more, but not too bad here. So again here, this is another test here, and this, I think, this is an integration test, I think. Yes, okay, it's an integration test. So we do need to be a little bit more careful here. And what we can do here is I wonder if I need to have this test. Yeah, it's fine. Should I register it actually? It's fine. I'm just gonna copy this one here. Let's see, how does it make sense here? So we have a method that needs those two. In this specific instance here, we don't really care about this too much. So what we could do actually here is just something like this instead. So input, because we don't really care how this is generated here. So what we can do here instead is return. Actually, I was thinking what we can do is just copy these like this actually to text. And we'll do this. And that's ugly. That is ugly. What is an easy way of doing this? Yeah, let's try again. See, and then I think this will be good. What happened to that one? Wondering why that... Okay, that is going to be too complicated, so we'll skip that. But what we'll do instead is we're going to register the schema and just use that method instead here. So in all these cases here, what I want to do here is we can actually use the register schema method instead here. So we'll do await here, run lifecycle register schema, and model input, model output, run ID. Okay, so by doing that we register schema, and now what we can do is copy and paste the method I just wrote here, more or less, and clean it up a little bit, and we'll use that for the test here instead. We don't need that. We'll need to have it right here, so and let's see. The tricky part here is going to be this. I may have complicated this a little bit for myself here, but let's see if we can get this working. Okay. Alright, so that's going to compile now, but I do think we can make it a little bit simpler. Just to make it simple for other tests here, what I'll do is do something like this. There we go. Alright. Let's fix these other build issues here. So they're going to be run artifacts. Copy this one. Okay. It's good. This will give us a good test actually for this anyway. So these we'll test now is the fact that we can actually use that method as well, even though it's implicit. Okay. And I want to start up the local registry. We'll wait here, because I think we'll need to test that. Okay, wow, it succeeded. Okay, so let's go ahead and run all unit tests first, and I want to add some more tests here, but we're going to start by making sure the ones we have run, and then move on to the other ones. Let's see. Okay, all those run, that's good. Let's go ahead and run all the SQL Server test here to make sure we test the build and push as well. And I think we can just run all of these. Actually, just run all these. And let's see if these work. There's a chance that we have some kind of issue here with the build and push, which I want to make sure we capture in that case. Because right now it's testing the register model for the first time, so that's going to be interesting. Okay, so that's good. The deployment catalog test is the one that potentially can break. We don't know yet. I'm a bit surprised that we didn't get more compilation errors, to be honest, because we did some changes here. But that's good. So these are the methods we just changed here for build and push image. So we will see if they work as expected here. Definitely a chance that they will break. Okay, good. First one worked, so that's good. I think if that one worked, the next will work as well. Okay. Takes a while to run. Alright, so while we look at that, while that's running, let's think about what some of the next steps could be here. So we've done that. What kind of tests can we add now? So we added this new method here.
Got a little Swedish there.
Let's see. Yes. Via the registered model schema. Okay. So we do need a test to make sure that if the model schemas are provided, then it's going to fail here. So we do need some basic tests for this as well here. Okay, so that works, that's good. So let's go ahead and push this first, and then we'll add some more tests here. I need to go ahead and regenerate those later, apparently. That's okay. Trim. Okay. Looks good. New method to deploy to Kubernetes with register schema. Okay. It's okay, I'll regenerate my secrets later. Okay, so now let's add some unit tests for this specific case here. And then let's add the Kubernetes test for the whole flow. And we can actually go ahead and do that directly here first. So let's start by the big Kubernetes test here. It takes for a while to run. So we have these should deploy model to container, right? And what we can do here is have the same one, but instead of passing it in like that with registered schema, I always want to make sure we get this working, you know. So what we'll do is we will create here. We'll go ahead and say await register schema model output run ID. Alright. And that is going to make sure we get that before. So this is the same as before. The only thing is I registered it before, and now when I call deploy here, we should have the same thing here. So I'm going to run this test while I will look at other tests here. Let's run this real quick here. It's going to take a while to finish, so that's why I'll kick that off. And while that's working, I want to go to my unit tests here and make sure I add a unit test for the exception that potentially can happen as well. Deployments. Let's see, we should have a deployment catalog test here. So we have this method right here. Let's see if this is running first. Okay. Hopefully this is not going to break. Okay, that's running. So go ahead and copy this one while that's running. Deploy model to container async without registered schema should throw exception. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this one. Okay. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do this. We're going to say expected exception here. It's going to be type of what's it called? Register or something. Model schema registered. Perfect. Okay. And we need to mock our repository here, so we'll do setup and say that if you try to get run with this run ID here. Actually, doesn't really matter. We'll just do any. Then returns new list model schema. Okay. So in this case here, okay, sorry. This here should be a run here. Do we have them already here somewhere? Okay, just to make sure that that works. GUI, it's fine. We'll just do a new one here, doesn't really matter. Okay. This failed. So this failed for some reason. Let's look at why this failed. Okay, let's run that again while we wait here. Actually, what's gonna do is let's finish this setup first. This is gonna be an easy one, and then dive into the other one here. And I'm gonna add a question mark there because I think I'm wondering if it's gonna come back as null or not. This one. We'll test that a bit later, but let's run all these tests here. Hopefully this is going to work. I think it should at least. And it did not. Okay, let's go ahead and look at why that's the case. It's probably because it's executed later. Because we don't. So this test has to be an integration test if we want to have this like this, because it's not going to work otherwise. So I think what we can do here is we can pull this out instead and make sure we capture this early instead, like this. And like that, we're going to get it executed directly and not later. And it'll be easy to understand here. And we can close this run like this. I think that makes more sense. Let's run these. And then let's see why the Kubernetes one failed. That was interesting. Okay, that passed. Perfect. Let's go back to this one now. And let's go ahead and debug this test here and understand what exactly is happening here. It's possible that we actually don't get the schema or something else going on here, but we need to figure out what that is before we make any other decisions here. I'm going to go ahead and look here at the namespaces here. Okay, so we have created a new namespace here. Doesn't seem to be cleaned up at all. Right, so let's go in and look here. So we have the run here, and we can see that we have 2 model schemas, so that's good. And they seem to have a namespace. Okay, so that's not going to throw an exception. That's good. And then what we'll go ahead and do is build and push the image. I'm just going to debug this a bit so I make sure we can see how this works. Get package dependencies. Something timed out here for us. So let's see here. This is just created. So there we go. So right now we're going to do is install like run.net add package here to install our package dependencies here that we used. So that should be good. And then we'll copy the model over. There we go. Copy the schema over. Let's look at the schema before we run docker build here. This is just copied over, I think. Yeah, I think that's fine. Model outputs. Okay, I don't see anything issues with this. It's good. So run docker build, and I'll go ahead and. Oh no, I should be fine. Let's go ahead and open this up. Okay, so let's go ahead and push this up, push the image, and then go ahead and deploy it to Kubernetes, and let's look at how that looks like. Okay, that's pushed. So now we deploy in a container to cluster, and hopefully you get URI back here, and we can look at what the URI looked like. That was very quick. Let me go ahead and run this one in Postman to see what is going on here. Okay, well that actually works, so it may have been a fluke here. Okay. I think we just happen to have some kind of local, like, small issue there in the test. It probably is not the most stable test right now. But it looks like it worked. Let's see if we can finish this test up. It's running the terminate here, so you see this terminating right now, and as soon as it's terminated, it's going to return back to us. There we go. All right, passed. Nice. All right, so that's not too bad. We are what we've done here is we fixed that test here. So what would be nice now is add one more test, and I think then we are pretty much done with this. So if we go back to the unit test here, we don't expect an exception if we have with register schema. Right. So we'll do here is, I wonder what will happen if it is. Let's do this actually, let's skip that, but let's add that to an end-to-end test here instead. So what I want to do here is, I want to check that we given a complete run without I don't really trust current unit test here, so I'm going to write more of a better integration test here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this line here, and what that's going to do is hopefully expects exception. Hopefully throw an exception here really early. So let's go see that does that. And I want to debug this because I'm curious to see what exactly is happening here. I'm mostly curious if that's going to come back as a null or not for a run. Okay. So now, is this null or... Oh, okay. That's good. Alright, that's still fine. I'm happy with that, because that's going to give me a test that passed. Perfect. I think it's good to have a test flight as well, just to make sure that that's expected behavior. Okay. Added test to ensure that works. Perfect git comment here. Alright, let's open up a PR and look at our changes, because I think this actually is everything we need to do here. And before we do that, I'm going to merge this PR in that we just completed this morning with the help of AJ, and thank you, Brett, for reviewing it. This seems good, so I'm going to go ahead and merge this, because this is what we base it on. And then I'll open a new PR here, and I'm going to call this wait, before we do that, let's go ahead and look at the issue, what it's called. It's pretty nice. I think I'm pretty happy with our progress so far. We've definitely done a lot of things with this release here, and I'm currently working on a blog post actually to show it more and what's actually going to happen here. This is the 370. Added method to deploy a model to a cluster that uses the registered model schema instead of passing runtime. I think this is going to be a great method that we can actually use later, because when we need this one, it's going to be for like the UI deployments, because at that point we actually don't know the model input and output, so it's important that it's registered beforehand. So I think this is actually going to be the mostly used one, but we don't know that yet. Okay, so let's look at the files real quick here for creating the PR. We don't need that deployment catalog here. One second here, deployment catalog. There's some namespaces we don't want here. Okay. Remove namespaces. Push that up. And then... Okay, so here we just like I'm doing that, we're getting a schema here, and we pass that in there, perfect. And same thing here, we're checking if the run has anything. I'm closing that into this one. Trimming this one, that's good. Custom exception, all good. And here we do tests. A lot of tests we have. Okay, perfect. So that's good. Let's go ahead and create this PR. And let's see if we can get this test to pass. I'm going to hold on to anything else for its test pass. And then I need to make sure to reset my credentials as well for the Docker registry, but I'll do that a bit later here. Add that to a list. A second. Reset. Cool. All right, let's wait for this to complete, because it's possible that something will, not work here. Okay, that's good. That seems to pass. So let's see. I think with this one, it's going to be the final kind of thing here. I'm going to close this one for you, AJ, for right now. Is there anything you can think of that we need to include more in release 1.2? I don't think so. So what I'm going to do here is start updating, putting a draft release here, and I'm going to start updating the README file here, and I'll complete that later, but I want to at least do that with you guys when we're here, and see how far we can get here. So we can update this README file here and add information about Kubernetes deployment. So we have this, we don't need to say we're currently working on it, it's currently there. And we should have a deployment section here. As Kubernetes. And to Kubernetes, so the model can be consumed. RESTful endpoint. For storing model via UI, so that needs to be a application can consume the model as well as to Kubernetes, so the model can be consumed through RESTful endpoint. We don't need to worry about that. Okay. So we'll do deploy model to a URI. That's fine, deployment target is good. URI. And this has actually been updated, I think. This method is now called deploy model to URI. Pretty sure, let's see. Yep. Okay. Okay, so now let's do the Kubernetes one here. So this will be deploy a model to Kubernetes. So deploy a model to Kubernetes. You can call the following method. C#. So we'll do here. Okay. To configure a container registry and Kubernetes cluster. Yeah, that. Let's see, ML ops builder. So we'll do that here, C#. And let's see, that's going to be, just copy this code right here and clean it up a little bit. Okay, so container registry here should be registry name, username, password, right? And then Kubernetes here, we're going to be kubeconfig, path, or contents. So either of those are fine, and then build. And then what we can do here is we can call that by executing this method here. Kubernetes cluster calling. Actually, we don't need to say that. Okay, and whatever this is going to be is something like this. If you don't know the model output at deployment time, you can register the model schema beforehand using the register model schema model output method. And let's go ahead and copy that over as well, and then I'm going to look at the current run here and see if our tests are passing or not. Where is that? I think it's here, right? Okay. I think documentation is so important. If someone's going to use a tool, we need to have good documentation. So even though it's some tedious time doing it sometimes, it's important to add it and spend some time doing this. So it's obvious how we can use the tool. And if someone's going to start it, they can do that directly. Okay. Okay. Alright, so don't leave. Well, that's running. Let's go ahead and look at this and see if our PR passed or not. Okay, nice, passed. So if anyone wants to review this, Brett, if you're on the stream today, feel free to review this and we can go ahead and merge it, which will be great. Okay, thank you, Brett. I'll go ahead and update this README file, and you can see if that looks good as well once it's done. So we'll see here, data tracking, model repository, model deployment. Deploy model to your right, deploy model. Okay, so that's a little bit, I think, a different style here. Let me read this through quickly. I need to adjust these a little bit here. All deployments. From yeah, if it's approved and everything's good, Brett, go ahead and merge it. Perfect, yeah. If you like it, approve and merge. I'm reading through these instructions to make sure it looks good. Which we can serve your model. Deploying the Q and UI. That model can be seen. Okay, deploy model to UI, give an employment target and registered model. You can deploy model to your UI. Okay. Model. So you get the let's see, MLOps net. Agnostic of cloud provider, so you can have your container registry either locally in the cloud. Kubernetes cluster. Free to host your Kubernetes Azure, AWS, or elsewhere. To simply finds it using the kubeconfig. Note that the use method either takes the absolute path to the kubeconfig or the content of the kubeconfig itself, which can be useful if you're using a CI pipeline. Okay. Too much information. Okay, that's good. Alright. That's good. Let's see. Good question, Brett. We don't really need it. But what I usually would do here is it's a range act assert. So we don't really have an assert here, which is why I said exception, yeah. Just to make it obvious for someone reading this that, hey, the expected behavior is on the top of the method. So I think it's good to keep it, actually. So I think it's okay to keep it. So if you're okay with that, I will actually go ahead and merge it. I think it's okay. Thank you for the review, though. That's awesome. Oh, accept. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and change that here, and then I will just go ahead and merge it without correction here. Oh, we can do it. It's fine. It's perfect. We don't need to wait for the build to finish to run it, though. So what you can do in GitHub, which I really like here, is that you can actually go ahead and change it like this. So we see that we have a spelling mistake here, so I'll say suggestion, and I get this thing right here, suggestion, expects, right? Expects. Yes. Hopefully that's the correct spelling. Second time around, expects exception. So we're going to add single comment here, and then what I can do here is commit suggestion, and I can do commit changes, and like that I don't need to pull or push anything. It just automatically gets committed to that, which is really nice. So now when we knew the test passed before, I don't need to worry about the comments. I'm going to just go ahead and use my admin privileges here and merge it because it's approved, and we have already known that the test works. Yeah, it's a nice little workaround in Git, so you don't have to go and actually manually change it and push it up and stuff like that. So actually it's a good thing if you have any suggestions on like a PR or review in the future, and you know kind of what you want, like for example like a spelling mistake, just add like one of the suggestions instead. It saves a lot of time. You can't commit to a branch or PR that's not yours though. So for example, I can only make suggestions to your PR or AJ's PR. I can't commit those. That has to be the PR owner doing that. But it's really helpful because it saves time when you want to fix PRs. Okay. Alright, so that's good. So now we should only have one issue left here, and that is, let's see, that should be the blog post. And I'm actually writing that right now, so we don't need to worry about that. If we look at the readme file here, hopefully I didn't make any spelling mistakes on that one. We have the model deployment here, and we have a deploy model to URI section, and a deploy model to Kubernetes section here. And that contains almost everything. I see that I have a mistake right there. Let me update that, and then we can look at the release a bit actually if you want to. And I may wait until tomorrow with that, but MLOps context, there we go. See, that looks better. Nice, okay. Sounds good. Alright, well, I think I'm going to hit pause on the stream for now, and then during the evening tonight, what I will do is I will make sure that we have a release prepped and going. Let's see what you wrote, Brett. I want to hear what you say. Yeah, I thought about it, but it's really difficult for me, I think, to know like what people don't know and what people know. A lot of these small like tips and tricks are things that I kind of learned through my own career, but it's difficult to know which ones are already obvious and which ones are not obvious. And I kind of learn new things all the time. People show me some cool shortcuts to save time. So yeah, maybe in the future. Nice. Oh, okay. Good points. That is different for sure. I think what I was thinking about actually, so I have this blog that I never write on, but I have this blog here that I have potentially for writing blogs, and what I was thinking of doing here, what I'm currently doing right here actually, let me show you, is I'm currently writing a blog post here for announcing MLOps.net 1.2 here, and this is going to go out probably tomorrow or something, but it's going to show kind of what we're doing here and why and how it's doing it as well. So I'm currently kind of wrapping this up, and honestly I would love a read-through, Brett, if you have a few minutes today or tomorrow, just to see kind of how it's looking. But what I wanted to do as well with this blog that I never use is to start creating some small blog posts for, like, as I said, like to-dos, like, okay, how do you track data? How do you track hyperparameters? Those kind of things. Just so we can have a little more a repertoire, as you said as well. I think you're on the same perspective there as well. So it's more meaty than just a readme, but actually showing you how to do it. And maybe that can also become some videos as we go forward, so we can have more documentation and more examples and those things. So very good point. All right, well, with that, we have wrapped up all of the issues and PRs for 1.2. I'm going to pause the stream for today and continue writing up the blog post. I'm going to prep a release, and hopefully, if not tonight, at least tomorrow, we should have a 1.2 NuGet package release that we all can start using. So hopefully you have learned something new today, and thank you for tuning in, and thanks Brett for all the support and the reviews so far. Catch you all later. Bye bye.